It's time for the College of Bass with Kevin Van Dam and Steve Panaz.
Hey everybody, welcome to College of Bass. Thanks for joining us tonight. We've got an incredible show. KBD is going to be here shortly, as will Jordan Lee, so I really recommend you guys stick around. We're going to get some updates from Redcrest today. Kevin fished the first knockout round today. Jordan's going to be fishing the knockout round tomorrow, and if he survives it, he's going to be ended up in the championship on Friday, so it's going to be kind of fun. Our main how-to topic tonight is going to be swim baits. Hey, swim baits are one of the easiest baits to fish, but there are little tricks to making them more productive. And I got to tell you, between KBD and Jordan Lee, and I don't care what your skill level is, you're going to learn something tonight that's going to help them make them more productive. Hey, let's bring Kevin in. Kevin, I watched that last half hour today, man. I was feeling for you. You had a tough day today.
Yeah. Gosh, it was frustrating because I had the bites to overall, I think it was the toughest day just looking at the score tracker out there. And I don't know, there's a lot of, there's several things that maybe caused that. There's a lot of locals. There's another big tournament this weekend, and there was a lot of them out practicing for that. But the bite was just weird today. And, the water's starting to warm up. The moon's full or almost full. And they're wanting to think about spawning. And I think that's more what it was than anything. But because I caught really the majority of all my fish on a Strike King Thunder cricket, which is a bladed jig. And they just had been choking it every other day and practice and everything. And today it just got real weird. And I just had fish come off that I normally would never lose.
You had what, four fish that you lost today?
I had 4 good ones that I lost. And like I say, the system that I use with a rod and reel, I use a composite rod for it, and that I don't ever have that happen. So it was definitely frustrating.
So you made the decision to fish shallow this week. What was kind of the thought process behind that decision? Well,
really, it was the weather forecast. Last week the whole country was cold. It was cold down here. They've had, a colder than normal spring overall. Water temperatures were dropped. But right before we came, I just looked at the long-term forecast, and I knew that full moon was coming, and the lake level was up. And I guess I didn't know for sure how quick they'd drop it. But with high water, warming trend, full moon coming, those fish come to the bank. Even if they're not going to spawn yet, they're going to come and start sniffing around. So with one day of practice, once it got moved from Palestine, Texas to here, we just said 1 day practice. I spent a little bit of time offshore. You can waste a lot of time. And I spent a little bit of time shallow, and I started getting bit. So I just said, you know what? I'm on to fish a pattern where the fish are coming to me. And that's what I decided to roll the dice with. And dang it, the next 2 days, it's going to be super warm again. I'm just sitting here now left thinking what might have been because it's got to get better. I mean, it's close to any day now, just really breaking loose where those fish just pull up shallow, set up, and are going to be a little easier to catch.
Rubanis was fishing frogs the last few days, and I was really surprised that he was fishing frogs this early. The water temp seemed a little bit low to me, but he put fish in the boat. He didn't today, but the last few days. And it seemed to me if he had made Friday, that thing could have lit up for him.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I tied a frog on yesterday because I knew it was coming. I thought it was the water would warm faster than it did today. But, the warmest water I really was around today was about 56. And that's about when I start thinking about a frog. We caught them at Lake Fork last year, really good and pretty cold water with it too. But it's time of the year is part of it. It's kind of the beginning of it. But this lake is setting up, for a really, really good spring, with this forecast and that. And frogs are definitely, with the shallow grass that they have here, those fish get super shallow like that. And it's hardly anything else you can throw. I mean, everything else is right on the bottom. So having a frog allows you to cover water, and big ones bite it.
Yeah. So I did have one question today. I was watching where you were casting this afternoon, and it seemed like you were focusing on areas of sun versus you're around a lot of docks and boat houses and things, but you didn't cast as much to the shaded areas. What was the thought process on that?
Well, when the fish are first setting up like this, they like to come up in sun, especially when there's, not much wind like today it was pretty calm to start with. And they just like you or I, or like your dog at home, in a sunbeam through the window, they just want to get that radiant heat. And so this is the one time a year where if there's a lay down or something like that, a lot of times they'll be on the sunny side.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, we're going to talk about swim baits tonight. I know this is one of your favorite topics, and so we're going to go deep into that. I'd like Jordan Lee is going to get involved in that conversation. I want to focus on open water with the two of you guys, and then after Jordan's get a chance to speak, I'd really like to go deep into fishing, talk about swim baits and heavy cover with you, so we can cover that. But mentioning Jordan Lee, he really exploded on the tournament scene a few years back, and you probably more than anybody understands what it takes to really do well at this level. What makes Jordan such a great tournament fisherman?
Well, Jordan works really hard at it for sure. Not that we all don't, because we don't, but I mean, he grew up coming up the hard way. He fished through the college level and just basically learned through time on the water. And he's not a young angler anymore. I say that. I mean, he's got a ton of experience. He's fished a lot of places. And the way you learn about techniques is you go out and you go through and put them through their paces. You try a lot of different things. And, where he lives in Alabama, he's got the opportunity to fish places like Gunnersville and then Smith Lake, which are very different. And, Smith is a lake that you better be throwing swim baits on. It's got blueback herring. It's got a lot of those big spotted bass in it. It's got a good population of largemouth. And any of those Clearwater lakes, swim baits are going to be players. So of all sizes, styles, depths, everything. So, they're kind of an all season bait that really is a big part of every pro's arsenal now. I know it is mine. I use them a lot. Just straight swim baiting, and then as trailers on jigs and thunder crickets, things like that too. So a swim bait is it's a main part of everybody's arsenal.
So he mentioned today that he knew nothing about swim baits. Then he started laughing at me. So help me give him a hard time during this segment a little bit later. I appreciate that.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, he had. I remember seeing him catch some pretty good ones last year, and at the heavy hitters event in Florida on a swim bait. So throwing the big swim baits, and there's a lot to it. I mean, there's a lot of different sizes and that to throw, and we all have our favorites. And I mean, the bottom line is you have to build confidence in any technique to be successful with it. Just like Fred Rambanis today was throwing a frog. That's his confidence bait. I'm a power fisherman. I've seen people say, well, I'd like to see it slow down and flip. Well, when the bass are in a foot of water like that, and this cover's so scattered just with that water willow, it just takes forever. Mark Davis was fishing around me in one creek, and he's fishing like a snail. I just can't, I physically can't do that, but that's, it's his confidence technique. And, he got 3 bites, and he was able to catch a couple, pretty good ones. And that's how tough the day was today. But day in, day out, my strength is power fishing, covering water, putting my bait in front of as many fish as possible, trying to make them react. That's what I got confidence in doing. And, every angler's a little bit different. There's quite a few guys in today's round that fish just like me. Stephen Browning, I guarantee he was doing the same thing. Andy Montgomery, he was throwing a thunder cricket, skipping boat docks and things like. I didn't watch it, but I'll guarantee I know him. That's his confidence thing. And Andy Morgan, same way. He's a power fisherman too. And you look, and all the power fishermen kind of struggled today. So it's just looking back, it's easy to say, but at the time, you got to go with what you got confidence in and fish your strengths.
Absolutely. So how long does it take? I mean, are you able to take an event like this and slide it back, or is this one of those things that sticks with you for a while?
It's frustrating because I would love to have the opportunity to give it another run on Friday. This one's going to sting for a while, there's no doubt. But you have to, if you're going to be a professional angler, you got to have a really short memory. It's important to learn And I've been doing this for 30 plus years, and I still learn every single event. Like, I'm amazed at how much I'm still learning. You'd think that you'd have all this experience and to pull from, but I still learn so much every single event. It just, it's amazing. I mean, we're dealing with unprecedented conditions this spring. The reason we're here is because Texas froze solid. Lake Palestine was froze, and it's just not normal. And that's what makes it really interesting. So this one is going to be really cool to watch, to see how it changes tomorrow and then again on Friday. I think you'll see a wholesale shift in how this tournament looks on Friday from what it was today.
In terms of what?
In the patterns that are working. And I mean, there's a lot of variables in play. So again, there's a big local event. It's a 2-dayer on Friday and Saturday. And there's a ton of those guys out on the water scouting, watching guys. So it's hard to have 7, 8, 10 offshore places to catch fish on. And, I know Brian Thrift has been, real successful to this point. And I know some of the other guys have been catching them that way too. It's going to get real tricky on Friday when there's, 150 other boats out there that know the same brush piles, so you got to fish where the fish are coming to. And that's what I was banking on. And, you'll see that somebody gets in the right little area where a bunch of those fish pull up. It could get ugly in a hurry because there's plenty of big fish in this lake.
Isn't it amazing? It seems like you could go out on the worst possible day, a front with 40-degree temperature drop and wind blowing and clear skies, and somebody always seems to go out and catch a limit of fish. It just kind of blows me away.
Yeah, today there was 10 of us out there, and it was a slower day. But I can tell you this: you go to a regular Bass Pro Tour event with 80, these 80 guys out there, and I don't care what the conditions are, somebody's blasting them. I mean, they're really good at what they do. We all have our moments, and believe me, I mean, you look at some of the names that were at the bottom of the leaderboard after the first 2 days. It's pretty shocking. I mean, there's some really, really good anglers that struggled here, and that's how it is every tournament. Sometimes you just miss it a little bit, and other times you fall, you fall into it a little bit. And my first day, it was easy. I caught what I needed in an hour and a half, and went practicing after that. So you just never know how it's going to go.
Wow. Hey, before we go any further, we got a prize pack. We had a winner last week with Heather Edgington of Cairo, Michigan, who won a prize pack last week. And everybody who's watching tonight is eligible to win this $275 prize pack. It includes the College of Bass Yeti mug, a couple of edge boxes from Plano, some great baits from Strike King, and a KVD box as well. So to win or be considered to win tonight, just comment, like, or share the program. Ask questions. We're going to get to as many questions as we can a little bit later. Hey, by the way, Kevin, this Yeti mug is unique. This is the College of Bass Yeti mug, and they're for sale on the Plano website tonight for $29.99. But what's really cool is all the proceeds go to the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. Yep.
It's a big deal. I'm glad that, Plano and Yeti got together, and, I kind of gave them the idea to say, hey, we should maybe give this to the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. They do a lot of great work. It's a great organization. I've been around it and part of it for a lot of years. And luckily, I got inducted a few years ago, and it's a pretty cool deal. So I'm really proud that we're donating all the proceeds to them.
And it's down at the Wonders of Wildlife Museum down in Springfield, Missouri. So if you're ever visiting,
it is worth. That museum is amazing, and the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame is it's just, there's so much history there. It brings back a lot of memories for me.
Yeah, wow. Hey, we got a little one more piece of business before we go any further. If you're looking for a great net, Fraybill's Conservation Series is on sale right now on fraybill.com. This is a knotless design, so your hooks don't get hooked in, and your fish, you can let them go easily. So they're 20% off right now, and this is the net that MLF is going to be fishing. All the guys in the Big Five events are going to be using this. So check it out at Fraybill. It's an incredible net. Hey, Kevin, last week we went deep into spinnerbaits, and it was a fascinating conversation. And we had a number of questions that we couldn't get to during the show. So I wanted to ask a couple right now. One was a guy named Mark Bradford had written in. He says, how important is wind when using a spinnerbait?
I always say the wind is your friend, and definitely with a spinnerbait, it really, most any power bait, whether I'm throwing swim baits or spinner baits, or like I was throwing a thunder cricket today, having a little bit of wind, it cuts down the light penetration. It helps disguise the look of the bait. The bass are going to be more active there. It pushes, people think that wind blows bait fish. It doesn't ever blow shad or anything around, but it does move the plankton, and the shad and the bait fish are feeding on that plankton. So it just activates everything. It gives the bass an opportunity to have an edge over their prey. And, if I got a choice to fish a windy bank or a calm bank, I'm definitely going to be fishing where the wind's at 99% of the time. That's
awesome. And then we had another question from David Ria. He said, do you have problems with the swim bait trailer causing your spinner baits to run sideways?
Yeah, you want to make sure that your trailer is definitely rigged perfectly straight, because it will cant it off. Typically, I use smaller diameter trailers on my spinnerbait. I'll use a curltail grub or a menace or something like that. I've even been using a lot of swim baits instead of a skirt on there as well. And again, it's just critical to make sure that it's straight. If you're using a high-speed presentation with a spinnerbait, I recommend no trailer at all, because it's so hard at higher speeds to keep that bait balanced with any kind of plastic on there. So just run the skirt for, burning the spinnerbait in clear water like we do for smallmouth. But for slow rolling a spinnerbait, I always want a trailer on there, and just make sure you get it perfectly straight.
Awesome. Hey, Jordan Lee is in the queue. We're going to bring him in just a few moments, but I did want to start a little bit on swim baits. You remember this as well as I do. In about the late 80s, maybe mid 80s or whatever, we started hearing about these giant baits coming out of California. The AC plug, Alan Cole's bait, and guys that Huddleston and Mike Shaw and those guys. I got something I got to show you. I've got an original AC plug right here. And you look at this, you don't think of that as an actual bass bait, but this thing really did stroke some giant bass over the years. And I know you fished a lot of the big swim baits in California. What was your first experience with them?
Yeah, the first trip that we made out to Clear Lake, I went to a local tackle shop, and I spent about $200 to get 4 swim baits. And, they're like as big as a tennis shoe. And, the first morning of practice, I went out there and I was throwing one of these big 10-inch, slow reeling it like this, and it's just swimming along. And right off the bat, I caught a 10.5 pounders, the first bite that I had. And I'm like, oh my God, I am all in. This is the greatest thing ever. And in that tournament, I threw it a lot. I fished it a lot in practice. I had a lot of them follow it, and I'd pull it away from them, and I thought I was going to go back and catch them. Well, in that tournament, I never caught one on one of those big swim baits. They would just follow it, but they wouldn't eat it. And I learned then that there's a lot more to swim bait fishing than just casting it out and winding it in. And, since then, swim baits have come a long ways. They've built them for all different types of cover and sizes. And so you can fish them faster and you can fish them deeper. And now a swim bait is really, really versatile for just about any situation. But my original, experience with it, I learned a hard lesson real fast.
So when did you start seeing the baits that we know now? I mean, the soft plastic style swim baits. When did you start seeing those show up on the circuit, and what was your first reaction to them?
Well, I mean, it started right at that time. I mean, after that, the innovation started, and competition drives innovation, and most of it comes from the tournament trails. Guys trying to figure out a better way or a system to have success with it. And that's what happens. Anything that something new comes out like that. I remember when buzz baits first came out, just how awesome of fish catchers they were. It was the same thing with the swim bait. Those first swim baits that I think got real popular were the Bass Treks, the hollow bellied Bass Trick swim bait from out there. And they have that wobble to them, and fish had never seen them or felt them or anything like that before. And it was just unreal. You could throw them in any conditions and be successful with them. And since then, there's a lot of swim baits. There's all different sizes, and, there's a ton of different rigging options, and, there's whole systems now just for all the different styles and types of swim baits. out there. Just like anything else, it's come a long ways in a short time.
So Jordan Lee, I'd like to bring Jordan Lee in right now. He's our Alabama's Jordan Lee is one of only 3 anglers in history to win back-to-back Bassmaster Classics. The others are Rick Clunn and Kevin. Who's the other guy?
I think I did it once too.
So. Congratulations. He also won his first ever MLF pro event on Kissimmee, and he was the Bass Pro Tour Angler of the Year last year. Jordan, how are you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing good. How are y'all doing? I'm enjoying listening to the show and picking up some tips from Kevin.
So, Kevin,
it was a rough one out there today, so hopefully it goes better for you tomorrow.
Maybe so. Yeah, it looked pretty tough on most of the guys. As always, few anglers are figuring them out, but it'll be a challenge, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So Redcrest started tough for you, Jordan, as well. I mean, that first day, I wasn't sure if you were going to make the cut.
Yeah, it was pretty tough. I knew with the 1 day right around practice period we had, I didn't really find what I was looking for, so I knew it was going to be a challenge, and it was tough both days for me. 1 day I was just fortunate to get a few better bites, and that's really the only reason I made it into tomorrow.
Hey, before we get deep into swim baits, I did want to ask you, Berkeley came out with a crankbait last year called the Fritz side that really seemed to explode. There's a couple new sizes. What makes the Fritz side so unique?
Yeah, flat-sided crankbaits obviously have been around for quite a while. They're really popular in cold water. They work. That's really when they shine, and it seems like the Fritz side, what makes it great is you can cast it really good. It runs in that perfect depth zone, that 5-6 foot, and it's just got a real tight wobble. You can cast it, like I said, really well. A lot of the wood baits, still work, and a lot of guys, it works really well in cold water, but the problem is you can't cast them, and the Fritz side just seems to have the same action is those wood baits. So that's what really makes it a special little bait. And they came out with a couple different sizes since the regular size was so good. Have a bigger version, which is kind of like a 2.5 style. It's called the Biggin. It's just a little bit bigger bait, and they make a junior too, which is a little bit smaller profile crankbait. So it's a great little bait that everybody should have.
So Kevin and Jordan, I really want to go deep into fishing open water with swim baits with you guys right now. And Kevin, I guess I'd like to start with you a little bit on what can you define the types of swim baits that are out there right now? The 3 main types, and kind of go into the attributes of each one of the swim baits.
Yep. So really it's there's swim baits that are built for different styles. There's the shallow water, like we have one called the Swimming Caffeine Shad that's really good. It's got a great tail action, but it's got a solid body, and it's really good for fishing like grass or heavy vegetation. It's, they're really popular in the Florida lakes and things like that for lily pads and Kissimmee grass. And then there's, the hollow belly baits, like the original Bass Tricks was the first one. And then, a lot of them, Strike King's got the Shadalicious, Berkeley has their hollow belly and that, and they have a really good wobble to them. The whole body quivers, and they seem to be better for a little slower actions and really in a little cooler water. That's when they kind of shine. It's great for pre-spawn. And then there's, the other style, like the Strike King Rage Swimmer. It's kind of a ribbed body. It's got a bigger paddle tail, and they just have a kind of a slower wag, and they're a real good cold water bait, but they're also a real good warm water bait. And they're bulky. Those are the 3 main styles that I like to fish. And of course they make them in sizes from anywhere from, little 2 and 3/4 inch all the way up to almost a 6-inch size, a 5.75. And it just depends on what you're targeting, how clear the water is. We throw a lot of small swim baits in open water for smallmouth, and I know Jordan does for spotted bass too. You got to throw, if the bait's small and the water's clear, you got to throw those little baits. They dang sure they're so natural, they can't help but bite them.
You know, we got some video of a hollow belly bait on a jig head. Kai, I'd like you to run that one video, and it does show, and we'll show it more. But you can see the entire bait is rolling. A lot of tail action, but a lot of body action to it as well. And if you look at that compared to more of the solid type bodies, you know, it's on the same exact jig, but you can see the big difference in the two baits. You got more of a tail action. This is obviously the Berkeley grass pig, but. So Jordan, when you're selecting a swim bait, I mean, take me through your decision process. Are you, say, let's set a scenario. Say it's you're finding suspended fish on top of trees or something in a clear lake. How do you pick how do you select the bait? How do you rig it? Take us through your entire kind of process.
Yeah, just like Kevin was saying, there's three really main styles of swim baits, I would say. And, when I'm fishing for like spotted bass in tops of trees, I'm going to be throwing like a power swimmer, which is just like similar to the Kitech. The great thing about the power swimmer is it holds on a hook pretty well. But typically when I'm fishing in open water spots, smallmouth, I'm going to throw that bait either in a 2.8 or a 3.3. Put it on a little jig head, and that's kind of my go-to. I don't really throw a big swim bait in those conditions. And, if I'm ledge fishing, that's when I'm going to go to more of like a hollow belly type bait, like a 6-inch is really popular. A 5-inch, it works great for largemouth, Tennessee River type lakes. And then, when I'm down in Florida, I'm going to be throwing like a grass pig. And that's how I keep it pretty simple. With swim baits, I remember when they first came out, like Kevin said, the Bass Tricks, I caught my biggest limit ever on Guntersville when it first came out. And that's really what started it, the swim bait craze. And they still work really well. It's not probably as dominant as it first was. That's kind of any technique when it first come out. It's usually killer those first couple of years, but they definitely have their time and place. And, like on the back of a bladed jig, that I saw somebody just comment and said the caffeine shed works great. That's another thing, the grass pig, muddy water like we have on Eufaula. That's what I've been putting on the back of my chatterbait too, and it has a little bit more thump.
So when do you guys decide to go to a jig head versus, say, a belly weighted bait or an underspin head? I mean, Kevin, I guess I'd ask you that as well. When do you make that decision, or how do you make that decision?
Well, it's more, it's a lot of it has to do with the cover than anything else. I mean, there's no right or wrong, and swim baits catch them, but I think that each style has its strength based on its action. For certain rigging styles, I throw a ton of swim baits on jig heads. If I can get away with rigging it with an open exposed hook, if not fishing brush or I'm not fishing thick grass, that to me is, the best way, whether I'm throwing big ones or little ones or anything in between. But, I definitely like a belly weight in cover, and, and I've even thrown one a lot with the spinner on it. Strike King makes one of those too. And you can put, really any type of swim bait on it, whether I'm fishing it through grass or even in open water. And that having that little spinner, a lot of times having a little flash, just adds a little extra, visibility to it and a little extra vibration. It can be a difference maker. I've seen it both ways. So I just basically experiment and see what the bass, really like, but it's all about getting the bait to the right depth. So, if you got to use a real heavy jig head, or, if you're fishing deep, you just can't use a belly weight and get it down there. Their belly weights are really pretty good for shallow water or shallower water and for shallow cover, or even right, close to the surface. And, jig heads of that are a lot better if you're gonna fish them down or put it on just like you showed the video of on the swim jig. If you got to fish one weedless, you can take the skirt off that and put that in and fish it in deep brush piles. I mean, they're very versatile baits, and they just, it's the action that the bass can't handle.
So, Jordan, when you're picking a jig head based on, say, depth or size of bait, take us through that process. I mean, how heavy a heads do you use? Are you looking for a slower presentation, a faster presentation? what are you looking for in a jig head?
Yeah, in my jig head box, if I'm throwing a bigger, like a power swimmer type bait or even a bigger swim bait, I usually have a half ounce or a 3/4. If I'm fishing really deep and it's summertime and I want it like a real fast fall, I'll sometimes throw 1 ounce, but usually a half ounce and 3/4 ounce. If I'm fishing, let's say 15, 20 foot, 10 to 20 foot is what I'm going to have. And if I'm targeting like spots with smaller swim baits, it seems like a 3.8 or actually a 3/8 ounce little finesse jig head is what I'm going to use a lot of the time. And, that's kind of what I stick with. I don't really, if I'm fishing, obviously the shallower water, I'm going to go with a lighter head. In deeper water, I'm going to go up to, like I said, a 3/4 ounce. So I keep it pretty simple on the size weight I'm throwing. So
are you throwing these on spinning gear, bait casters, combination of two? I mean, what are you looking for when you're throwing the swim baits?
Like on those smaller swim baits, I know some of my I fished some events and I've had them on spinning rods, and I've kind of got burned from that because, I've lost a lot of fish on a spinning rod, just throwing it real slow and can't get a hook in those fish. So I started just really going to all bait caster, even on those small, like 2.8. I'll throw 8-pound line on a bait caster and a little bit smaller setup, but I tend to hook a lot of those fish better and land more of them on a bait caster. I know some guys throw them on a spinning rod and do well, but it just seems like I've lost too many fish at times on a spinning rod setup. And I feel like you can just get a little bit better feel too on those finesse swim baits. On a bait caster, I can kind of tell what depth my bait is a little bit better. So that's just my personal preference on that.
So what rod length are you using to action, that kind of stuff?
Typically I'm using like a 6'10" medium heavy or a 7-foot medium heavy rod, and throwing like a 6/4 to 1 reel, a little MGX Revo is what I throw. Cast little baits good, and like I said, 8-pound fluorocarbon, trilene 100%. It doesn't break even on those little swim baits. So that's really my main setup.
Wow, Kevin, I know you're a big spinnerbait or spinning gear guy out.
Yeah, so I know what Jordan's talking about, where you lose fish, especially if you do a lot of smallmouth fishing. You can. So I've learned to throw bigger rods, so you can really move a lot of line and you have a lot of power with the rod. So I throw a 7.4, or really my favorite is a 7.5-foot spinning rod, for throwing light line. I'll throw 6 or 8-pound test fluorocarbon, and that helps keep the bait down. The one thing that I think is critical is straight fluoro, because if you're trying to get the bait down, 20 or 30 feet, and you want to have good action, that fluorocarbon sinks, and it's a lot better than doing that than using braid, because the braid is just so buoyant. Even small diameter braid, I have a hard time keeping it down, in the water column. So.
Fire like Jordan, are they after you, Jordan?
Yeah. They're probably coming to me.
I'm right downtown, so I'm at the Major League Fishing
media
room set, and it's right downtown, and the fire trucks just went by.
They're coming after me.
Yeah. So both of you guys are fishing fluorocarbon. Do you ever go to braid or any? Obviously, in heavy cover, you're probably going to do that, but in open water situations, are you guys, either of you, ever going to braid?
I prefer straight fluoro. I mean, it is. I love braid on a spinning rod with a fluorocarbon leader, just because you don't have any twists, and you do get great sensitivity and things like that. But when I'm fishing a swim bait, I just feel like I get a lot better depth control, or I understand what the bait's doing at different depths. In shallow water, it'd be fine, but in anything deeper, I like straight fluoro.
So I want to ask both of you guys this, but Kevin, if you had 3 colors for open water, what are the characteristics, or your main for more clear water lakes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to throw, like a green gizzard shad in the I mean, they're mostly natural bait fish, patterns, the smoke, pro blue, things like that. These shad looking colors, translucent if it's real clear, and if it's slightly stained, I'll use some of these solid, something that has more of a solid color to it, but all natural, bait fish colors. And at home where we're fishing a lot of bluegill type lakes and things like that, I'll use, a lot of them that are green pumpkin or have, a shade of green pumpkin to them for it. But day in, day out, when, most of these lakes, it's a shad type bite, and you want to imitate the forage.
How about you, Jordan? What are your favorite colors?
Yeah, it's kind of the same deal as Kevin said. I have never seen like swim bait, smaller swim bait. Just when I'm going with a natural shad color, you can't really go wrong. When I'm usually picking one up, it's going to be just like a white / translucent, just natural color, and you really can't go wrong with that. In dirtier water, like the sight flash, I've seen that make a difference. That's kind of a bold white color. But overall, you can't go wrong. Natural colors, and on those little finesse swim baits, you're going to put fish in the boat.
So one last question, Jordan, before we let you go. I know you got to get prepared for tomorrow, but when you're targeting spots or smallmouth or largemouth, do you approach the species differently in terms of speed or position in the water column with the bait? Kind of talk about that side of it in terms of targeting specific species.
Yeah, it definitely matters. But typically on a smaller swim bait, 2.8, 3.3, or like a 3.8 even, most of the time the fish I'm targeting are going to be suspended. So, I'm not going to let my bait typically go all the way to the bottom, but I'm not going to, keep it up on the surface. It's usually a slower, medium style retrieve, and trying to keep it where I think the fish are at. So if they're in the middle of the water column, let's say above some standing timber, I want to just I want to let it sink down, obviously, to wherever I think the fish are at. If they're in 20 foot, I want to keep it right above them. And typically I want, I try to visualize, like when I'm reeling that bait, I want them to be looking up at it for, spots and smallmouth. Typically that's when you're going to catch more fish. When it's below the fish, it seems like they don't go down on it as much as they do like coming up and eating it. So that's something to keep in mind. For smallmouth and spots, just trying to keep it above them, and that definitely catches fish.
So if fish are related to structure, so if they're bottom hugging, are you trying to ride it near bottom or right above the fish? Or talk about the difference between that and say suspended fish.
Yeah, sometimes when the fish are on the bottom, like in the ledge tournament, they're usually deep, pretty close to the bottom. I want to, let it hit the bottom, and sometimes just a slow reel, and just kind of keep it in that strike zone. It doesn't matter really what bait you're fishing. You always want it to be around them. So if they're, if you graph over them or you feel like the fish are relating in the lower water column, you want to let it sink and make sure it's all the way at the bottom before you start, slowly reeling. And definitely the speed you're reeling it at too, because if you're burning it back, that's going to keep it away from the fish. So just pay attention to that.
Well, hey, we appreciate you coming on tonight. I know you got to get ready for tomorrow night, so I don't want to keep you any longer, but thanks for joining us on College of Bass, and good luck tomorrow.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Thank y'all.
Get them both.
Thank you.
See you, bud.
Kevin, I know, I think you got a different opinion on speed. One of the things that I know you like to fish fast, is at least as fast as possible. Are you always using a straight retrieve with swim baits, or talk a little bit about trigger and strikes?
No, I try to, especially in clear water, once it's warm, speed is critical. And Jordan, he kind of alluded that a little bit too. In the summertime when you're fishing ledges and things like that, you cast a swim bait out there and you can reel it along slow. And then, you might burn it 4 or 5 cranks real fast and then let it fall back to the bottom. That quick burst of speed, a lot of times it will trigger them. And it's the same for clear water, like smallmouth or spotted bass when it's warmer, that, they'll key into that bait when it's swimming along, but then a change of pace will trigger them into biting, so typically, burn it 4 or 5 times and then kill it, let it sink back to the bottom with tension on the line though. And it just let it pendulum fall back. It can be deadly effective. So I like to use probably a oversized head in a lot of situations when I'm trying to trigger them like that, just so that it has a pretty fast fall, and keep that line tight and let it fall, burn it up and let it fall back through the zone where I think they're at, especially if you're seeing them suspended and things like that. It can be good. He made a really good point in that you always want to fish a swim bait above their line of sight. It's kind of like a spinnerbait the same way. You want it slow rolling over the cover, and whether you're fishing in the grass or brush or cover or not, you want to keep that bait above the fish's line of sight and where you think he's at, and just above him though. So that's why it's so critical, on suspended fish, to have a really good presence of knowing how deep your bait is, to count it down to a certain depth, reel it a little bit, and then just trying to keep it into that exact in that exact zone. It takes practice to be able to say, well, hey, I'm going to fish a swim bait and keep it at 15 feet, or I'm going to keep it at 20 feet. So it's all about the line diameter and the size of the head and swim bait that you got on there to be able to control it, to get the depth and the speed that you're looking for. Very similar to changing blades on a spinnerbait to do the same thing when you're fishing a spinnerbait deeper. You adjust the head size and the blade combination to give you the speed and depth you're looking for. And a swim bait, exactly the same.
Do you think it's fair to say that people use most anglers or a lot of anglers use the lead heads or a weight that's too light for the bait?
In most cases, I tend to use heavier than most. Most of the time I'm throwing a 3/8, and I throw a lot of 16th ounce increments. So I got 3/8, 5/16, halves, 5/8, 3/4, 7/8, and 1 ounce. We in the North, people are really adamant about custom jig heads and things like that. I think I sent you a slide with a bunch of some of my favorite swim baits and with some of the heads and things that we use. So
go ahead and run that.
So I like a rage swimmer day in and day out, and this is one with all the hollow belly baits and the belly weights, with the blade and that. This is what I throw in shallow water. That's a must-add belly weighted hook, and that the cool thing about that is you can slide that weight either forward or back to make it run deeper or shallower with the same exact size on it. If you run it forward, it makes the bait run deeper. If you slide that weight back, it makes it run shallower. The other slide is the one with the jig heads, I think, that I sent one in. If he's got it, I saw it earlier.
Kai, I know you've got it.
Yeah, there. So you hear some, from the little 275 there with a jig head rigged on it, and there's some 325s and some 375s, and I've got some heavier heads there. That fatter body like that, with a heavy head, it's got a real slow wag, and that's my go-to open water swim bait. These are what I like to throw for smallmouth when they're down on the bottom and they're eating gobies and things like that too. I'll use a heavy head and just kind of skip it right along the bottom, when they're in that zone. So part of it is knowing kind of a little bit about where the fish should be set up. And smallmouth and the Great Lakes are so focused on gobies now that you can't hardly go wrong if you're throwing a goby imitation about anywhere.
Yeah, they work great. But I guess the thing that you got to remember is that, you're moving a ton of water with a lot of these swim baits, and you got to make sure that you cover that. Hey, in the photo, we've got some baits that have ribs, and we've got baits that don't. When do you fish the ribbed bait versus some of the, say, more of the smooth style baits?
So the rib baits are designed the ribs help slow the bait down. They're great for those, medium type speeds and things like that. And they move more water, so even if that tail's wagging, each one of those ribs is pushing more water. So they have a larger sonic image, so to speak, that the bass will pick up with their lateral line. So in dirty water, it's going to be better. But in real heavy cover, like, if you're fishing that thick Kissimmee grass down in Florida or really thick hydrilla, that's where those smooth baits, I throw the swimming caffeine shad, you're throwing the grass pig. That's where they really, work really well through the cover. And, the hollow bellies are all smooth sided too, and that's that's more about the wobble that they give. The hollow belly just makes the whole bait
The
shake.
whole bait shudders, yeah.
And they're phenomenal. I think that they really shine in stained water and in cold water because they just display so much water, and they're better at slower speeds. I'm not saying you can't fish them fast, but where they really shine is at the slower to medium speeds.
Let's move out of clear water or open water and move into heavy cover. So talk a little bit about your strategy for picking baits, and what are your maybe 2 or 3 different favorite approaches for fishing swim baits in heavy cover?
Yeah, they're so good for shallow grass because it's kind of like that frog. It's, if you use a belly weighted hook, and especially a lighter one, you can, throw them through real thick grass and real heavy cover and keep them 100% weedless. You can't throw a spinnerbait in that thick of grass. And even if it's slimy and stuff like that, you can still make that work real well. So, I use the screw lock hook. Mustad makes a good one, like I said, with that weight that you can slide back and forth. And, I'll use just enough weight to keep that bait in the zone where I want, or sometimes no weight at all. They're fantastic right on the top. Again, if we go to Florida and the Harris chain or Okeechobee or Toho, around that Kissimmee grass around the shoreline or even those flat pads, you can buzz that thing almost like a buzz bait right out over the top, and they'll just come up and explode on it. And
really,
it's just, yeah, even in places where a swim jig gets kind of grassed up, it's kind of thick for that swim bait will still come right through there.
That's amazing. So are you fishing a larger bait, like a 5 or 6 inch in the grass?
I typically do. I like that, at least the 475 to, the 475 and the 5 inch, you're fishing for largemouth in that situation. And so many times we're targeting big fish. So a bigger bait, it's a big profile, moves a lot of water, and they're fantastic for, bushes and things like that. So if you got, a flooded situation, you're fishing a lake in Texas, Lake Fork or Rayburn or something like that, and you got flooded bushes. Again, that swim bait is totally weedless. I'm going to throw it on straight braid in that situation around that shallow grass. I mean, no fluorocarbon here. This is straight braid and, 50 or 65 pound test. And you can, skip it back in holes in the bushes and things like that, or even, real shallow boat docks. If you got heavy, thick, shallow brush, cover, grass, vegetation, flooded stuff, swim bait's a great choice for getting those fish out of there.
So in terms of rods, you're going to use sort of a flipping stick style, 7.4, 7.6, medium heavy or heavy, or what are you throwing?
Yeah, if I need to still be accurate with my casts, I'm going to be a little bit shorter. Probably my favorite is a 7.4 heavy. I make one in my series that's what I throw it with, is that 7.4. If I'm out in open water now or open grass, yeah, you can go to a big rod, like almost like a flip stick. I'll throw a 7.6, heavy action with that braid. You're just, you want something you can throw a long ways and you got a lot of power to get them out of. But if you got targets, a little shorter rod's always going to be better.
So if somebody's fishing open water or cover and they're not getting bit, if you had 1 or 2 tips on maybe helping them trigger strikes, what might it be?
It's about, you really want to change speeds a lot. A swim bait is no different than any other bait. A slow, steady retrieve catches fish when they're active, but when they're not, stopping it and starting it, just quick little a twitch, jerk, pause. I mean, the same kind of thing I'm going to do with a spinnerbait or a crankbait. When it hits some cover, snatch it forward a little bit. Make it erratic, make it look like it's trying to get away or it's injured. Bass are they're a predator, and their instincts tell them to target those that are look different from the rest. So I'm gonna try to make it move a little bit more erratic.
So in heavy cover, I'm assuming you're fishing more bluegill colors, the black blues, the green pumpkins, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Water
clarity is a big part of that. In dirty water, black and blue is one of my favorites, or like that sight flash. I'm going to do something either bright or dark. And then as it gets a little cleaner, especially in a lot of lakes where there's a population of bluegill, and a lot of bluegills live around grass, I throw a lot of green pumpkins, or shades of green pumpkin. And, a lot of times I'll dip the tail in chartreuse. maybe even a little bit of orange here and there at times, but usually chartreuse. But day in, day out, those colors and vegetation really work well. And if the water's clear, even, green pumpkin or the watermelon shades are going to be real popular, because that's just what lives in the grass is the same color.
So why swim baits are all in that sort of that shad style, the longer, thinner baits? Why did the bluegill shapes never really take off?
I think part of it is that they're harder to rig. That's harder to get them to go through cover the way these, more streamlined designs are. And bluegills come in all sizes too, so, I mean, even though it's not the exact shape of a bluegill, I'm sure that in a lot of cases that when they see it going over the top of them quickly in the grass and things like that, that's what they think it is. So it's just hard to get a taller, shape like a bluegill is, to stay streamlined and to not roll and not turn. It's just design wise, it's a lot harder to fish one like that at speed. I mean, that's why a torpedo is shaped like it is, because it's designed to cut through the water and be fast. And those swim baits are the same way. If you want to trigger fish, you got to be able to pick up the pace at times with them. And, having that speed is really important to do that.
Hey, before I forget, I want to move on, but if there's anything to add, but we were doing a commercial for Abu years back on a lake down in Texas. It was Chill Canyon or something. And the producers kept yelling faster, faster, faster. And I had the ugliest, weirdest colors swim bait on just to get through the grass. And about the third cast, the water bulged behind it, and an 8-pounder grabbed the bait. It was the weirdest situation that's ever happened to me. Hey, anything to add on swim baits before we move on?
No, I think we covered a lot. I've seen a lot of good questions. I had a lot of people asking me about Redcrest and what I did and what I was throwing, the thunder crickets and things like that. So yeah, we can. I think we've covered it, and we'll have some of those questions next week on the show that we had from here. So if there's something that we missed, I think we covered a lot of it between Jordan and I, and we can hit some of them, highlight a few of them next week as well.
Yeah. Hey, we got some viewer questions from last week that I want to bring in. The first one was from Michael Allen Johnson. And he said, speaking of lures coming into vogue and falling out of favor, which was one of the things we talked about with spinnerbaits last week, is it a matter of the pressure on the fish and needing to see something new? Or what do you think it's actually a great question.
Yeah, it is. And I think at times, especially on these lakes that do get a lot of pressure, these famous lakes like Lake Fork or Gunnersville or here, Lake Eufaula. I mean, this place it's amazing how many people come here to fish. And they do. I mean, once I think fish see a lot of baits, they definitely get conditioned to them, or I've seen it. I've seen the same thing with Jordan mentioned it with the hollow bellies. I mean, it just initially they were unbelievable, and now they still catch fish, but it's not quite the same thing. But a lot of it, I think, is in our head, in that our fishermen in general are always looking for the magic bait, the secret lure, the one that's going to really make the difference. So they like new things. That's why, companies always have, new innovative products coming out, because they know that anglers are always looking for things new. I mean, we're trying to come up with new colors, and obviously it's important to be natural, but a lot of that I think is us, not necessarily the fish, and when these baits, and it's confidence too. I mean, again, there's guys that are just really confident in certain techniques and certain baits, and they make them work when other people can't.
By the way, I noticed on Redcrest coverage this week, especially day one, a lot of guys were throwing spinnerbaits. I thought it was very interesting, given the show last week. Hey, we had Jimmy Crawford asked, what gear ratio are you using for crankbait fishing? Yeah,
so, I like, I've got a reel that I designed in my series for Lose that has a 25-inch per crank. So it's a 6:3 to 1 gear ratio, but I really like that 25 inches per turn for cranking. Some people like a faster reel. If you go to a reel that has too high a gear ratio to it, I think I lose a lot of feel. So you see that, I'm not scared to wind it pretty hard. And it's just what I'm comfortable with and what I'm used to. I get a tremendous amount of feel with that. And, I believe it's the perfect ratio for cranking, whether you're throwing square bills around shallow cover, or you're throwing a 6XD out on a ledge, I like that speed for it. And again, if I want to reel it faster, I can wind it pretty darn fast. Some, other people like a faster reel so they don't have to turn the handle quite as quick, but it's just what I've, gotten really comfortable with.
So is that true with lipless baits, lipless cranks?
Yeah, especially in cold water, you want to do that. The one problem with a lipless bait, even in warm water, is, man, it can be a mistake to overwind it. To reel it too fast. There's times when the fish really want it fast, but early season, when the traditional pre-spawn bites going on, where everybody's throwing a red eye shad and Toledo Bend and Rayburn in the spring, having a little slower reel forces me to slow down a little bit. I throw that same one, the 25-inch per crank reel. And it just, I have such good feel of that bait. When you got a little piece of grass on there, I can tell, and just having that where I'm not overwinding it like that, I just have a lot better control of the bait.
Hey, this leads to another question. You'll look on the deck of most bass anglers. They've got 10, 12, 18 rods laying out there. Do you ever feel that it's a mistake to have too many different actions on the deck, just so you don't learn how to fish the rod, the combination correctly?
I carry a lot, I have my own line of rods and reels that came out, and I've got 23 different models, spinning, composite casting for crankbaits and bladed jigs. And
so I should withdraw this question.
Yeah, you can. I'm it's like a golfer with golf clubs. You got to have the right club for the right situation. But we all have our own preferences. They're not, Jordan is going to use something a little different than me, and you're going to use something, and it comes through experience like that. So there's not a right or wrong. It's really
whatever works for you.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with your physical size. If you're only, if you're 5'6" or 5'8", it's hard to throw a really long rod around targets. Compared to somebody who's 6'7", it's totally different on how you're going to handle those rods. So part of it is physical stature and the techniques and what you're, confident in. But it is important to have the right tip action, to have the right action in the rod for casting accuracy or controlling a bait, or to maximize the action out of a certain technique.
I was really surprised when Jordan said he fished more of a heavy action on some of the swim baits. That really kind of blew me out of the water. Yeah,
in most cases, I would tell you, you're always better to fish a rod that's too stiff than too soft. You're going to lose fish in a lot of situations with too soft a rod, and it's just part of the deal. But hey, one thing I wanted to talk about was, again, you see a ton of the shallow water guys here. A bladed jig was really dominant. I was throwing a Thunder Cricket. Plano has the best bladed jig box. If Kai, if you can pull up that edge box, if you're looking for a good box for your jigs or your bladed jigs, this edge box right here is absolutely unbelievable. It locks them in place. You just put the neck of it right in those little posts. When I started the season, I had 170 Thunder Crickets in this one box. It's a 3700 series. And, I've got a swim jig box, a football head jig box, a bladed jig box, and then a flipping jig box. So if you're looking for a good jig box, look no farther than that one right there.
Kevin, that might be the best tackle box ever made. For really what it does, there's nothing better.
It has solved a huge nightmare for me for keeping my jigs organized by size and color. With the clear lid, I can look right in there. I just write right out on each row on the outside, what size they are, what weight they are. And I know right where I'm at. And it really makes a big difference.
We got time for one more question. It's Mark Bennett is his name, and he says, on a large flat or weed line, do you prefer to make long casts or target specific areas within, say, the weed line or the flat? That's actually a great question.
Yeah. So, if you're fishing up on top of the flat, you can go up and fan cast around, but typically, in a lot of cases, we're targeting the outer edges, or, it just depends on how thick the grass is. If it's real thick and it's an outside wall, a lot of times I'm going to try to fish closer to parallel down that if I think the fish are on the edge. But most grass lines are more scattered. And, I like to fish them at a quartering angle and just, until the fish tell me how they're relating to it. That's how I'm going to position the boat. I'm always thinking about my casting angle to try to have my bait in the zone that I think they're in for the longest time. So, if I've got an edge they're on, man, paralleling it keeps it in the zone 100% of the time. If they're all scattered over the flat, then you got to fan cast the whole thing, So it just really depends on how they're set up. But he's thinking exactly spot on. Is like, hey, man, how should I position the boat? Yeah. Once you get a few bites, that should give you a pretty good idea. And then, put the boat where you're going to keep that bait in the strike zone for the maximum amount of time.
So what kind of weight do you think it's going to take Friday to win on Friday? And what techniques do you think are going to be the key?
I think it's going to be real interesting. I think there'll be, Brian Thrift really put on a show the first day. If his pattern holds up, I don't think anybody's got anything for him. But I think with the pressure that's coming on this lake, that it's going to be challenging for those guys fishing offshore. But when you do find them, you can catch multiple fish. That being said, with the moon's coming, it's not going to get cool at night. Every night it's gotten cool. Tonight, the temperature's not going to drop. It's going to get in the mid 70s again tomorrow, and it is on Friday. The shallow fish are coming. I mean, there's no doubt that they are coming. The problem is once they get up there and get locked down and start thinking about spawning, you can't cover water like I've been doing with that thunder cricket and get them to react. You got to start fishing slow, Mark Davis style. But if you can get into a small area where there's a bunch of them at, and it will happen here, you can do well in a hurry. So that's going to be the $300,000 question at the end of the week: is what's going to prevail, shallow or deep?
Wow. Well, very cool. Hey, before we go, we got to pick tonight's winner of the Plano prize pack for $275. It includes Mr. Van Dam, the College of Bass Yeti bug. So Kai, I know we have a winner picked already.
John Creek.
Hey,
nice.
Congratulations, John. That's way to go, man. That's happy for you. So Kai will reach out to you, get your shipping address, and we'll get that to you. Kevin, I really enjoyed tonight. Tonight was a lot of great information on swim baits, and I learned some stuff tonight that I didn't expect to learn. So it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's been a hectic week, here with the change and coming from Redcrest and that too. I fished today, so I was a little bit scrambling to make it on time after the media obligations and things like that after the deal. So next week should be a little bit calmer, but I can't believe we're already 4 shows in. We got 4 more to go though.
It's unbelievable. We're going to talk kayak fishing next week with Christine Fisher. And we'll dig up a few more topics. I'm going to put fish in the boat for everybody. But hey, I'd like to thank you, Kevin, for being here tonight. Thank you for everybody for joining us tonight as well. And have a safe trip back, Kevin. And look forward to catching up with you a little bit later this week, man.
Yep. I just want to say, hey, thanks to all the fans. I appreciate all the well wishes and the support this week. Believe me, there's nobody that wanted to put this one in the bag. I wanted to win this one bad, and I took a gamble on what I thought was going to do it, and today just didn't work out the way I wanted. And it's one I'm going to be thinking about for a while, but I appreciate everybody's support and look forward to next week. And then, before you know it, we're going to be at Sam Rayburn in a few weeks, and that should be really good. The weather is finally turning around nationwide. Where we live in the north, it's a little ways out yet, but down south, man, it is gangbusters. The bite's happening a lot of places right now in the deep south. The fish are spawning with this moon, and it's really getting into the heart of the season.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Yep. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching The College of Bass. Join us for an all-new episode every Wednesday night.